Good morning. Friends, in our first reading in our gospel this morning, we just heard the prescription for paradise. Because in the first reading, we hear God's commands, and if we look at it in the positive, God says, I command you to take care of the foreigner. You shall take care of the foreigner. You shall take care of the widow. You shall take care of the orphan, and you shall take care of the poor. In other words, take care of the people who are powerless, who are unimportant, who are suffering. And these are not suggestions, they're commandments. And in the gospel reading, we hear Christ summarize all of the Mosaic commandments into two. And he states them in the order that he does for a reason. Because as he says, total devotion to God has to come first. Because it's only through that we're able to be strengthened by the receipt of the graces that God and the gifts of the Holy Spirit that God sends to us when we love him. And that's been the prescription for Christian living for 2,000 years. The pattern of life that so many of the saints have followed down through the ages. And it's a pattern that one person is living today in some of the most horrible conditions imaginable. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about him. His name is Rick Frechette. Rick Frechette. And Rick was born in the 50s in Connecticut, middle-class family, and as a teenager, feeling called to the priesthood, he joined the Passionist order and was ordained a priest in 1979. And then soon Father Rick was assigned to work with an organization that goes around the world establishing and running orphanages. In other words, he was assigned to take care of the orphans, to follow that command. And after a time in Mexico and Honduras, in 1987, Father Rick was sent by his order to Haiti. And when he got there, he opened an orphanage as he was sent to do. And he opened this orphanage for children whose parents had died of pretty much terrible diseases rampant at the time. And his goal was not just to have an orphanage, but to use the orphanage to restore the sense of family in these orphans within one generation. And he did that by asking, as the orphans grew up and became adults, he asked many of them to stay and work there and act as mother and father and uncle and aunt to the young children that were there, and to have the orphanage become like a community of families. And it worked. But because so many of those orphans were themselves ill with some of the same diseases their parents had died from, Father Rick bought an old hotel and turned it into a children's hospital. But he had a big problem. No doctors or nurses would come to treat the children there. So he took matters into his own hands and decided to go to medical school. And sure enough, he went to medical school. And in 1998, Father Rick also became Dr. Rick. And Father Dr. Rick started a foundation there, again, to help with the needs of the people there. It's called the St. Luke Foundation. And with the support of a lot of benefactors and with a lot of the local people who had become drawn to him and the good works that he was doing, they built by hand a state-of-the-art 120-bed pediatric hospital. And then after that, because the need was there, they built an adult hospital. And then over the next few years, they built 34 schools. And all these were run and staffed by local doctors, nurses, teachers that were all drawn to this good work. And then one day in 2007, some parents of children who had been killed in a gang shootout, a crossfire of a gang shootout, came to Father Rick and begged him to go to the city morgue and retrieve the bodies of their two daughters and give them a proper Catholic burial. And so he and his associates from the foundation went to the city morgue, and the electricity had not been working, and the stench of death was overpowering. But using flashlights and smoking menthol cigarettes to mask the smell, even though none of them were smokers, they went and found the bodies of the two girls and started to bring them out. And Father Rick sensed the dozens of other bodies that were just stacked there like cordwood, calling out to him, "What about us? Will you leave us here? Are we nothing to you? Nothing to anyone?" So Father Rick and the men took all of the bodies that no one had claimed, and they made coffins out of cardboard and box tape, and took all the bodies to the potter's field and gave them a proper Christian burial. And since that day, Father Rick and the men from the foundation go on Thursdays to the morgue to do the same thing, this great corporal work of mercy, to bury the dead. And all this has been accomplished in spite, if you know anything about Haiti, it's a land of horrible political turmoil and lack of public infrastructure and grinding poverty and rampant gang lawlessness and earthquake and hurricane after earthquake and hurricane. But yet, because of the tireless work of Father Rick and all the people, the local people that work at the foundation and the benefactors who fund it, there have been hundreds of thousands of patients treated and children raised. And over 3,000 people per year on average have been given a proper Christian burial. And believe me, I'm just scratching the surface of what this man has done, living out the gospel message. And he'll tell you, if you see his interviews, that because they're faith-based, because they put God first, their love of God first, they succeed. Whereas dozens and dozens of these secular, non-governmental organizations with billions of dollars have not had any impact. They've failed miserably in Haiti. Now you might be thinking, "Oh, that's great, but I'm no Father Rick." And you know what? I'm no Father Rick either. We're here in Phoenixville and not in Haiti. But if you think about it, right here in our area, in our community, someone's sick, someone's suffering, someone's lonely, someone's out of work, someone's dying. They're our neighbors, these someones, and they need our help and our loving care. And we can give it the way that Father Rick does. Because if you read about him, it is noted that he starts every day in prayer. First, he starts with the Psalms, the prayer, the liturgy of the hours, and then Mass at 7 o'clock every day. And then it's only after putting this love and worship of God first that he goes out and works tirelessly for love of neighbor. And when he gets discouraged and depressed, and he does, and he gets outraged at the violence and the injustice he sees every day, the senseless death, he'll tell you he turns back to God. He turns to the scriptures. He turns to the example of the life of Jesus and of the saints. And from this, then, he gets the fortitude and the courage to go back out and to continue to love neighbor. That's his prescription for paradise, and it can be ours too.